mirë se vini në kallëzo për një me. Sot jemi në qendër të Kievit, kryeqytetit të Ukrainës, edhe mrapa me është Ministria e Punëve të Jashtme të Ukrainës në Mihalevska, sheshin Mihalevska. Në këtë vend këtu, ukrainasit kanë vendos me i ekspozu makinat ushtarake që i kanë zonë nga forcat sunduese, pushtuese të Rusisë, të cilat e filluan pushtimin e tyre në shkurt të vitit kaluar. Tash i kanë ekspozuar për të kallëzu që pushtimi i Rusisë që u tentu me u bo edhe ndaj Kievit, edhe ndaj rajoneve tjera të Ukrainës ka dështu, edhe pse kuptohet lufta e tyre, po vazhdon sidomos në lindje të Ukrainës. Pas kësaj do ta takojmë edhe intervistojmë Oleksander Merezhkon, i cili është kryetar i Komisionit parlamentar për politikë të jashtme të Ukrainës, i cili është njëri prej politikanëve që e ka nënshkruar një letër shumë të rëndësishme bashkë me njerëzit që i udhëheqin Komisionit parlamentare për punë të jashtme në shtete tjera, një letër tepër të rëndësishme që kërkon nga bashkia ndërkombëtare me u fokusu jo vetëm në politikë të jashtme në Ballkan që e ka për qendër Beogradin, po kërkon nga ata me u fokusu në një politikë të balancume, siç e ka thirrë kjo letër, politikë të balancume që e merr parasysh edhe Kosovën e jo vetëm Serbinë. Të shohim çka ka me thonë Merezhko. Mr. Merezhko, thank you for accepting to do the interview here in Kiev.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's very symbolic to have our meeting in these circumstances in Kiev.
Before having to come here in the shelter to do the interview with you, we visited the trophies in the front of your Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the trophies from the Russian invasion that Ukrainians have captured. And it left an impression on me that your National Museum of the Military History had written an explanation of what that is and a little bit of history which resonates with the country where I come from, Kosovo. That history says, first in 2014, they annexed Crimea, the Russians came to Donetsk and Luhansk and they said, we weren't there. Kremlin said, it's not us, we weren't there. In the late 2021 and beginning of 2022, they said, we are only doing military exercise. Again, testing the grounds, testing while the world believed that still it wasn't absolutely Kremlin's fault. Today in Kosovo, we have recently, 6 weeks ago, an attack of 30 what we call small green men who came from Serbia and organized a terrorist attack. The world has not changed its stance against Kosovo or on Kosovo and in the Balkans. I want to bring you back to when you started as Ukrainians telling the world that Kremlin is serious about invading. Did anybody believe you?
You mean the year 2014? The beginning of war, or
yes.
The year, yes. Well, to us it came as a shock, to tell you the truth, because at that time there was a period of the revolution of dignity, and we were preoccupied with this revolution, how to come back to our trajectory, political trajectory of development towards Europe. And when the so-called little green men, when they came, when Russia started to invasion of our territory, in the beginning it came as a shock. I think we were not prepared for that. And at the same time, it was obvious to us that we are dealing with external aggression. External aggression. We didn't know how to react to this. But later we learned to respond to this. Unfortunately, the world at that time, it was silent. It was silent, and our partners, it's my personal belief, they didn't do what they could do under the circumstances. In particular, to do what they're doing right now, to provide us with weaponry, which would allow us to effectively repel Russian aggression at that time. And it had some influence, of course.
It's an honor for me to interview you because you are the Ukrainian politician of the highest level that has taken the effort to sign a really important letter, which you signed with your counterparts, other parliamentarians, heads of foreign policy commissions in the world, where in August this year you said that you want the international community to learn from our past and ensure we do not adopt a Belgrade-centered policy from the Balkans. Something else you said in that letter, which resonates with what happened later, that you said that recent discoveries of armed caches in northern Kosovo and reports of continuous weapons smuggling across Serbia and Kosovo border highlight the risks of further escalation. True, a month after you signed this letter, the biggest escalation happened. First, I asked your counterpart, British counterpart, Alisa Kearns, the same question as I will ask you. How did you know that that's what was going to happen?
It was inevitable, our experience, our historical and personal experience, because, you know, the invaders, they use the same patterns, unfortunately. They learn from each other. And to me, the danger of the whole situation was exactly about this word escalation. Because in our situation, when we are fighting desperately for our survival, to have escalation in the Balkans is too dangerous. It is in the interest of Putin. He's trying to create such escalation in the Middle East, in the Balkans, in the Indo-Pacific, because he understands that the only thing which can save his regime is diverting attention from his aggression against Ukraine. That's why it was so dangerous, and that's why the letter was so important, to attract attention of world leaders, of global community, to this coming escalation in the Balkans.
Also, I want to talk a little bit about why did you show such a big heart about this? Because most Ukrainians I have met until now, and when I visited here and talked to your institutions, the attitude was, we're too busy fighting Russia. We are in the middle of war, and you're asking us to think about Kosovo. Our heart is just like too engaged with this. How come a year after your invasion and busy with your war, you took the risk of signing this letter, for which you were disciplined by Vučić?
Well, to tell you the truth, it was quite a risk for me. But I don't regret, because I did it on moral grounds. The truth is that Russia is waging a war against Ukraine, which is genocidal war, which is imperialistic and which is colonial war. Russia wants us to bring us back as a colony. And the Russia is committing right now against the Ukrainian nation the crime of genocide. And we can draw some parallels between the situation of Kosovo and Ukraine. Because the result why Kosovo became independent, it was genocide. Euphemistically, it was called ethnic cleansing. But from legal perspective, it was genocide committed by regime of Milosevic against people in Kosovo. Russia right now is committing genocide against Ukrainians. And in order to prevent, by the way, it's our legal obligation under the Convention of, on the Prevention of Genocide of 1948, it's obligation of each country to do everything to prevent genocide. That's why I think when we see genocide taking place in other parts of the world, it is our moral duty to react to this and try to prevent this. And it was one of the reasons why I had signed this letter.
But this is quite a new narrative that you are putting, the parallel between Kosovo and Ukraine, which Kosovars feel so much. They have welcomed at least 20 journalists are now residing. There's a huge Ukrainian flag in the middle of my capital city, Pristina. There is outright support for Ukraine. But until now, in Ukraine, how can you explain that it is largely the Russian narrative that has dominated, that Putin used Kosovo to compare with Donetsk People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic, and hasn't your public in Ukraine taken that narrative to believe it's true rather than the narrative you're talking about today in front of me?
Yeah, I'm sure that you have noticed when you're talking to common people in Ukraine, you would definitely notice that majority of Ukrainians have very warm and friendly feelings towards Kosovo. And they support Kosovo because exactly for this reason, because they see certain parallels and they understand how it feels to live when your neighbor is bullying you constantly, when it threatens to invade you, when the neighbor is using different kinds of provocations. You know, there are lots of similarities.
I want to just add to the similarities that you spoke about. We see Russian forces dismantling and making off with monuments, cultural treasures, looting hospitals. This is what happened to Kosovo museums during the war. Another parallel, just to remind you, 1999, Serbian forces massacred prisoners in Dubrava prison and said it was NATO who did it. At the same time, you've had in the Oleksander prison camp in eastern Ukraine a few months ago, Russians detonated a bomb that killed Ukrainians, claiming it was you who did it. These methods, including mass rape, looting, mass graves, are they becoming generally known as parallels in the Ukrainian public, or only to you who is well informed about foreign policy?
I would say that regarding such details, not many people in Ukraine unfortunately know about this experience. But in general, the general picture, we understand it. After Bucha, after Irpin, after rapes, tortures, you know, we understand what it's like, and we are only beginning to understand from historical perspective how difficult it was for people in Kosovo to defend themselves from acts of genocide.
Let's go to the key question then. After we have so many similarities, where does Kiev currently stand with coming closer to the policy to recognize Kosovo?
Well, it's a difficult question. To me, it has several dimensions. Political dimension, moral, as I said, and international legal. I view it from the perspective of international law because all my life, before I became a politician, I was professor of international law. And to me, there are strong arguments, international legal arguments, in favor of recognition of Kosovo. First of all, we have decision of the International Court of Justice. Second, when we're talking about conflict between right to self-determination and territorial integrity, we should be aware that there is one exception to the principle of territorial integrity. When someone commits a genocide against the nation, it creates this exception from legal perspective, and at the same time, you know, our leadership has to be very careful right now during war. Maybe there is some apprehension regarding position of Serbia and regarding position of Vučić,
So can you explain to us, because you're very important in that on top of what you're saying, you come from Zelensky's party, the servants of the people, because we've had previously in Kosovo, we've had visits by Gocharenko, who argued for Kosovo's very openly about Kosovo's independence, but he's from the opposition. Now, I'm glad you are not from opposition and you think the same. Can you explain to us what is the resistance of the stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders that resist recognizing Kosovo, and what are their concerns?
I believe that right now, under circumstances when we're fighting for our survival during war, there are some political arguments in favor of not recognizing Kosovo, at least for now. Because the basic argument is that it sounds like this, that if we recognize independence of Kosovo, it might have negative impact upon our legal argumentation against the so-called DNR, LNR, which are nothing but occupied, legally speaking, it's occupied by Russia territories, nothing more. And at the same time, to me...
But I'm very curious, for example, does Zelensky see more similarities and parallels of Ukraine with Kosovo rather than with DNR and LNR with Kosovo? I mean, just curious what his thinking is on this.
It's hard to say. I think in this situation, we usually ask for the opinion of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And they are trying to be careful, and rightly so, in these issues. You see, there is a certain, I would say, difference between position of the Parliament. Yeah, we're trying to follow the policy of values, so to speak. Yes, and sometimes we can afford to be more idealistic, not realistic in terms of international relations theory. And ministry has to be more careful, and they see the bigger picture. Sometimes they see those things which we members of parliament don't see, and they take into consideration different factors.
But you yourself, under capacities that you operate in, you have suggested that some relations with Kosovo should start. I've seen reports that you spoke about opening liaison office.
Yes.
Are you doing this because it's only your own initiative, or do you think there is support for this, political support?
It's my personal view. But you know, I view international relations, President Biden once said that international relations in the final analysis are interpersonal relations. And I view it in this way, from the point of view of relations like between people. And Kosovo wants to be our friend. They have done a lot to Ukraine. They have introduced very serious sanctions against Russia. Serbia is not doing this. The people in Kosovo are very enthusiastic about support of Ukraine. It's visible. So is doing something for Ukraine and is trying to be our friend, whereas Serbia is not our friend. So the question, it's very logical, very simple question. Why we can't be friends with Kosovo? You know, to me, I believe that we should make some steps to meet halfway.
So what interpersonal relations does Merezhko itself have with Kosovo people? Have you met any Kosovans?
Yes, I met and I talked to the former chair of Foreign Affairs Committee. I met him.
Haki Abazi?
Yes,
Okay.
That's him. I met him. I'm a member of Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe.
Okay.
And that's how I met him. I also met him at the conference of GlobSec in Bratislava.
Have you began, at least in your own capacity as parliamentarian, some subgroup of friendship group of Ukrainian-Albanian friendship group in the parliament? Anything like that? Has it happened?
It hasn't happened because, according to our rules, we can create such groups of friendship with foreign parliaments when we recognize such countries. Yeah, we cannot, for example, create officially. We cannot create a group of friendship, interparliamentary group of friendship. If
Can't you be friends even without recognition? Since, as you said, we are fighting almost the same enemy, nationalist, fascist ideologies.
Yes, that's true, because in this regard, we have common enemy in the form of neo-fascist ideology, yes. But we have another form, which is called group of members of parliament, interfactional group of. So it can be created and devoted to any issue, to any aspect. And as far as I know, a representative of opposition, Oleksiy Goncharenko, he has created such a group in favor of friendship with Kosovo.
Since then, since talking with the former head of our foreign policy group in the parliament, have you been approached or met any other parliamentarians or Kosovo officials since then?
Since then, no. I didn't have contacts with officials I met only members of Kosovo delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe.
A group of parliamentarians and civil society activists visited Kosovo last week. After visiting Serbia, they visited Kosovo. And it struck me that they were very wary, unlike yourself, that you've been open in interviews about what should happen with Kosovo. They were very wary on even allowing photos being taken with photos being published of them with our Kosovo officials, although they met with Kosovo Prime Minister, they met with capital's mayor, Pristina mayor. They asked them not to put photos, just not to upset the Serbian public opinion.
It's my personal point of view. I don't think we should care about Serbia's opinion when we're dealing with representatives of Kosovo, for example, because, you know, we don't impose our opinion on Vučić when he goes to China and meets with Putin. To me, it's outrageous. You know, it's like meeting Hitler during the Second World War. But Vučić is doing this. But we don't tell him, we don't dictate him whether to take picture with Putin or not. It's immoral, but he can do it. And I don't see anything bad about, for example, meeting official representatives of Kosovo. Kosovo, after all, is recognized by our closest friends and partners, our allies, like the United States, like Germany, most of the European countries, they recognize Kosovo. By the way, I believe that maybe to make things more easier for Ukraine, it would be great for the European Union to come up with a strategy towards Kosovo. Because we are trying to become a member state of the European Union. And we need to coordinate our foreign policy with the foreign policy of the European Union. And it stands to reason for the European Union to have common policy towards Kosovo.
When you spoke about possibility of Ukraine eventually recognizing Kosovo, Vučić told you off. Were you scared?
We are not scared. We're fighting against Russia. How can we be scared of Vučić? You know, I think that he is a very smart politician. He understands that he will never be able to take over Kosovo, to reestablish control. He understands it very well. To him, it's only leverage or a kind of bargaining chip in his negotiations with the West. He wants to negotiate something from the West, from the European Union, in exchange for recognition of Kosovo. So this is about pure politics. It's very cynical, I would say, and very pragmatic game, political game. But it's not as such about recognition of Kosovo, because even, you know, any international lawyer understands that there is recognition de jure, official legal recognition, and recognition de facto. And de facto, Serbia already recognizes Kosovo. It holds negotiations, it has liaison office, you know. So another question, why we can't have liaison office? Even Serbia has it. You know, this is what I would do as a first step. Second, again, I think that we should be firmly, as a country which belongs to free world, to democracy, we are saying that we are fighting for democracy and democratic values, and it's true. But we should be consistent. We should support other democracies, including Kosovo, as one of the democracies in the Balkans.
I think a lot of the world is looking at Ukraine for its moral anchor, because precisely what has happened is what you just said, that there is a lot of cynicism and geopolitics in the international community about how they treat the entire Western Balkans with a Belgrade-focused policy, as you said. And what I want to do for a second with you is be a bit futuristic and test that cynicism. Can you imagine, in 20 years' time, after the war would end in Ukraine, can you imagine being untwisted to negotiate and make peace with Russia by international community? That international community 20 years on tells you make peace with some successor of Putin, a spokesperson, because for us, Vučić was a spokesperson of Milosevic. When I was a refugee in 98, 99, and we had to flee with my family, Vučić was on TV arguing why we have to be expelled. Can you imagine your war in 20 years' time that Margarita Simonyan, who is a spokesperson for Putin, is somebody you have to make peace and they ask you for concessions to Russia?
Well, everything can happen in politics. We cannot rule out anything. But to me, the thing is that for Ukrainians, this war is a matter of life and death, of our survival. If we agree to any concessions, for example, territorial concessions, it will not only undermine the whole international law and security system in the world, it will create dangerous precedents to follow for other dictators. But the thing is that in the occupied territories, Russia is continuing genocidal policy. There is nothing Ukrainian left. So if we agree to any kind of compromise, we will stop exist as a nation. We'll be just exterminated. That's why we have no choice.
In retrospect, you were pushed by international community to concede a lot in Minsk Accords. What do you say to that attitude that international community had towards you, Ukrainians, when Minsk was signed after 2014 war?
Yes. Actually, I was a deputy head of the Ukrainian delegation to the Trilateral Contact Group. I was involved in the process of negotiations.
So what are the lessons learned from you, Mr. Merezhko, to Kosovans in negotiating with Serbia? What is your lesson, and do you regret doing something? What can we learn?
It makes no sense to negotiate with a country which doesn't keep its promises.
But you did. You nevertheless did.
Yeah, but yes, we tried to reach a compromise, because we're peace-loving people. We tried our best to reach a compromise, but it didn't work.
Okay, but are you saying you almost played the game to prove to international community that you are not the bad guys, and it's important to, in international law, play the game and try it out?
Yes, absolutely. To play by the rules established by international law, to respect principles of international law, non-use of force, for example, one of such principles, non-interference in internal matters, and so on. But the thing is that we are for peace, but we're against appeasement of the aggressor. And I hope that we will not repeat the mistake which was already done in the 20th century. I mean, Munich, 1938. Appeasement of the aggressor never works. Never works.
It's precisely appeasement is the word that most neighbors of Serbia today, Bosnians, Kosovars, feel that what the West is doing with Vučić is appeasing. Can you explain why? I've asked international diplomats why they do this. They say we're not appeasing, we are treating everybody fairly. So they are in denial. Can you, having tried it in your skin as Ukrainians, explain to us how come people like Vučić, which for us is the Putin of the Balkans, get away with murder? How do they do it?
Well, it's hard to explain. Maybe some politicians in the West still have some illusions. But illusions are a very dangerous thing because they distort reality. They prevent you from thinking clearly and to acting in response to any kinds of provocations. I think that the psychology of invaders and aggressors is very primitive. They make provocation and they see what happens. If there is no reaction, if there is no response from the position of strength, they go further until they are stopped. And it's better to stop the potential aggressors on time, to prevent in the future more problems. And this is exactly what the Western democratic countries should do with any potential or actual aggressor.
I'm just interested, in 2014, when you were part of that delegation, when you were being pushed to compromise, were you upset with the West? How did you control yourself, to be in a position where you were seeing the West taking gas from Putin, doing business as usual. Did that make Ukraine smarter? How did you keep your cool to continue?
Yeah, I joined the delegation in the year 2019. So the negotiations had been already proceeding for 5 years before me. But of course, we were disappointed because, you know, the thing is that we were under impression after signing the Budapest Memorandum and after giving up our nuclear arsenal, we were under impression that we did this in exchange of firm guarantees. But then all of a sudden we realized that these guarantees don't work.
Kosovo is an exception. The West intervened to stop Serbia. It bombed Serbia. It's an exception that it never repeated anywhere else in the world. Was the Kosovo example useful to you?
Well, my position of Kosovo as an international legal scholar has been changing, to tell you the truth, because it's a very hard case. It's a kind of challenge to international law. But after studying this case, I realized that from international legal perspective, first of all, democratic countries, NATO countries, they had no choice but to use force to stop genocide. It was their duty. From moral
wasn't it our duty, our European duty, never to allow another Srebrenica to happen? They didn't allow in Kosovo, but do you think they did enough to stop the Ukraine war?
In the year 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea in eastern Ukraine and had made an attempt to annex Crimea, I think we could have received better help, better aid from the West. And there were politicians in the West who understood this. One of the American senators who was a friend, very close friend of Ukraine, he offered for the presidents of Western countries to come to Crimea at that moment, and it could stop Russian aggression. It didn't happen. Unfortunately, we didn't receive the necessary weaponry, which we receive right now, and which really helps us to survive and defend ourselves. So at that time, there were no real sanctions, only symbolic sanctions. And I think that by such inaction, Putin was encouraged. And that's why he continued his aggression.
So to bring you back from that history to today, how well do you think the war is going for Ukraine right now?
To me, it's already a miracle that we survived, because let's not forget that we are fighting against superpower with huge manpower, human resources, with huge military resources. And it's difficult to fight, but we're doing this. It's already a miracle. And we are not losing our territories. On the contrary, we continue to liberate our territories. We don't advance as quickly as we would like, but still, kilometer by kilometer, meter by meter, we are moving forward.
And how do you think the war in Gaza has influenced the focus on Ukraine? In practice,
at present moment, it didn't have any negative impact. The aid continues as it was before. So, but nobody knows what will be in a couple of years. But one thing is for sure, Putin is trying to use the situation in the Middle East against Ukraine. He's supporting all kinds of chaos. And I personally believe that Russian special services, intelligence, they knew about this coming invasion by Hamas against Israel, but they didn't inform about this Israel. Maybe because Russia was involved. It was in the Russian interests to start escalation in the Middle East.
Mr. Merezhko, what do you say to the cynical argument that I hear now, in that, look, we thought when the war in Ukraine happened, we thought Putin is the worst enemy, the most evil guy in the world. Today, after 5 weeks of Gaza, more journalists, to tell you just a figure, more journalists have been killed in the 5 weeks of Gaza than in the entire 2 years of war in Ukraine. 10,000 people now have been killed in Gaza, which took a year to get that number of casualties. What do you say to the cynics who say, look, Putin doesn't look that bad compared to the deaths caused by shelling in Gaza? What do you say?
Well, to us, Putin is a pure evil, and to us it's the biggest danger because of all the crimes, atrocities which he had already committed. But at the same time, I think that evil, global evil, can wear different masks. We're dealing with a terror. Russia is officially recognized by the Council of Europe as a terrorist regime. Hamas is a terrorist organization. In essence, it's the same kind of evil. When you use force to kill civilians on purpose, when you invade other country with the goal, genocidal goal, to exterminate all the people belonging to certain nationality, this is pure evil.
I want to come back to Western Balkans. There was a leak recently showing that Serbia is sending weapons to both parts, Russia and Ukraine. What do you know about this?
I don't know anything. It is confirmation about this, but I don't rule out. Well, to me, Vučić is trying to maintain, he's playing the game with the West and with Russia. To Russia, he wants to present himself as a friend of Putin, friend of Russian people, and so on. And I don't rule out that he's already helping Russia to survive economically. The fact that he doesn't introduce sanctions, that he buys Russian oil and gas, it's already helped to Putin.
Has Mr. Zelensky told him off about that? Has he asked him to put sanctions? Has he asked Vučić to put sanctions?
I'm not aware of this, but you see, we are members of parliament. We had online meeting with our counterparts, and I raised this issue.
With the parliamentarians of Serbia, right? With the parliamentarians of Serbia.
Of course, we raised this issue.
What did they say?
I was disappointed, to tell you the truth, in their reaction. I realized that maybe it makes no sense to continue.
What did they say?
They didn't say anything. At least I haven't heard any specific answer to our calls. Or we asked them, for example, to recognize Holodomor, the Great Famine in Ukraine, as a genocide. You know, they didn't do anything. They used very strange argument, by the way, which shocked me. They said, we understand you. We were also bombarded, meaning bombardments by NATO. But the thing is that NATO bombarded them because they wanted to stop genocide. You know, it's something different. It was a necessity to stop genocide by using force. There was no other option. And I think it's very incorrect to compare their situation with our situation. It's absolutely different. We are victims of genocide and not perpetrators.
So you see now what neighbor we are next to, but nevertheless I want to go back to my question. Is Ukraine formally buying weapons? Nothing would be wrong about it. You need weapons, but just want a confirmation. Is Ukraine buying weapons from Serbia?
I haven't heard anything about this. There is no confirmation about this.
If Kosovo government and Kosovo people want to do more for Ukraine, develop this conversation that you are helping to develop, what could we do? What could Kosovo government, what could Kosovo people do?
Well, first of all, we already appreciate what you are doing, like sanctions, like humanitarian support, because, you know, we appreciate and value each gesture of solidarity with us, because the things you are doing helps to save lives in Ukraine. It's important. I understand that Kosovo is not the biggest country in the world, and you cannot objectively speak and do much in economic, but what you are doing, it comes from your heart. This is what important for me personally. I think that, for example, Kosovo Parliament, to me it was a good sign that Kosovo officially declared that you're going to join the guarantees for Ukraine. And I think that Kosovo could participate in Crimean platform. The Kosovo Parliament can adopt a resolution recognizing Holodomor as a genocide of Ukrainian nation. Such politically symbolic actions, they're also important for us. And of course, if you have weaponry, it would help us also.
So if Kosovo wants to give weaponry, despite the fact that it's small, doesn't have its own weaponry, enough weaponry, you would accept it?
Well, of course, it's not up to me to make such decision. It's beyond my competence.
Okay.
But if I were representative executive power, I would accept it.
What is your advice when you saw that what happened in Banjska Monastery, 30 men, killing one police officer, organizing that action? Many people, politicians in Kosovo, spoke about it as a Donbass scenario. So if it is that, what should Kosovars learn from you Ukrainians?
Well, to me it sounds very similar to what we had when Russia invaded, under the guise, of course, when Russia invaded the eastern part of Ukraine. It looks similar. Now, I think, first of all, we need to have objective foreign investigation, and if it proves, if it is confirmed, then there should be very strong reaction against those who are masterminds and perpetrators of this provocation. If the investigation will find out that Serbia is involved, then there should be a strong reaction on the part of the European Union, the United States and other countries.
But right now, the cynicism is that, I don't know if you know, Kosovo is under sanctions and measures from the EU and the US, while Serbia isn't, although it's been 6 weeks since the end of Banjska. Isn't it strange? Do you find this strange?
To me it sounds strange, of course. And at the same time, you know, it's important to understand the situation of Kosovo. Kosovo is being bullied. Kosovo doesn't bully Serbia, for example, or other countries, or other neighboring countries. And I think it should be taken into consideration when trying to resolve this issue.
How do you Ukrainians manage not to be at all plussed by your air raids? Right now, you arranged with me an interview, which I thought you're going to be late in because there was an air raid. I thought the conference is not going to be able to take 600 people from the two top floors to the basement and continue business as usual. What happened is you came on time, 600 people came on the ground. How do you manage this?
We got used, you know, it's impossible to get used to war. But still, you know, we have no choice, we have to continue to work. For instance, I came right from the sitting of the Parliament, and we were voting, and when we heard about sirens going off and air raid, we continued to work to finish our business, to finish voting, and then we proceeded to the bomb shelter. Yes, this is our life, everyday life. We got used to this. It's been for almost 2 years. But you know, Russians make a mistake when they think that by air raids, by bombing, they can break our will to fight. On the contrary, we become more angry and more determined to defeat Russia.
This is what I see as an outsider coming here for short trips that I've come to Ukraine since the war. But what does it really feel like as a normal human being to have air raids happen every week? Does it affect you? How does it feel like to be in the psyche of a Ukrainian?
It's a constant stress, to tell you the truth, especially the last winter was really harsh for us. We had blackouts, sometimes we didn't have electricity. At my apartment, for instance, we didn't have electricity for 2 days, sometimes for 3 days. And when you're dependent in order to cook even something, when you bring children from kindergarten and they have to play in the darkness, of course it's difficult, especially during the winter. But you know, the best thing to do is to concentrate on what you can do under the circumstances, to concentrate on your work. to keep away your thoughts from this stress and from thinking about air raids. Because, each Ukrainian, by doing his or her job, helps to bring closer victory. This is my perception.
We spoke about what a common Ukrainian is like, but a common Kosovar, I want to tell you, is very willing, ready, and has capacity of building and helping in the reconstruction of. We've built Astana from scratch. Kosovars, Albanians have gone there and built that city. So that's where I can see that Kosovar common person can help. But I'm curious whether you can help in removing the visa regime.
To tell you the truth, I'm not knowledgeable about this particular case because, again, it's a matter for the ministry.
I googled it and we need visas. Is it possible to remove visas completely? Because Kosovo has removed visas for Ukraine.
Yeah, I think it would be logical and fair to do the same thing. You should respond in kind. If you have an action of kindness, an action of support, you should do the same. It's just common sense.
Kosovo has been asked to approve a new concession to Serbia and the Serbs by allowing the Association of Serb Municipalities to be registered in Kosovo and to function with some powers. But it has not guaranteed that Kosovo will be recognized by Serbia in exchange.
Of course, politics is based on principle quid pro quo, something for something. And if you are talking about serious compromise, you should expect something to get in exchange for the concessions you are making. And in this regard, I think if I were, for example, a citizen of Kosovo, a representative of Kosovo, I would definitely insist on Serbia officially recognizing Kosovo before making any concessions.
But Serbia has said it will never recognize. And
never say never again.
Never say never.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's just a matter of negotiations. I hope that they can be persuaded also. And to me, it's just, to tell you the truth, it's a formality. Because Serbia is already recognizing Kosovo, already dealing with you. Because, when we are talking about recognition from international legal perspective, there was a very famous thinker, Hans Kelsen. When he was writing about recognition, he was right in saying that it's kind of political formality. Whether you recognize or not recognize, you still have to observe international law with regard to this state or this country. So Serbia still has to observe principles of international law, like non-use of force, territorial integrity, non-interference, pacta sunt servanda, and so on. And we're talking here about some kind of political formality.
As a professor of international law, if we go back to what started the First World War, it was a Serbian assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Since then, Ukraine and Kosovo, 100 years later, ended up in confederations, first Soviet Union for Ukraine, Yugoslavia for Kosovo. What are lessons learned from today on how do we see the Balkans playing a role in further conflicts in Europe and beyond?
Well, Balkans has always been very complicated and a difficult region from geopolitical perspective. And of course, any event can lead to the new war in the Balkans because the stability is rather fragile and it's rather easy to destroy this equilibrium of this stability by using different kinds of provocation. That's why we should be very careful about maintaining stability in the Balkans. And we need to preserve status quo, at least as a minimum.
Mr. Merezhko, thank you for accepting to do the interview underground in Kiev here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Kjo ishte çka kemi përgatitur për ju sonte prej Oleksander Merezhkos, kryetarit të Komisionit Parlamentar për Politikë të Jashtme, këtu që erdhëm në qendër të Kievit prej sheshit Mjalevska, që është mu pranë Ministrisë së Punëve të Jashtme, e cila është pas meje, si dhe në sheshin në të cilin ukrainasit kanë vendosur me i ekspozu të gjithë tanket, të gjitha mjetet tjera ushtarake që i kanë mbledh prej pushtimit të dështuar të Rusisë që ka tentuar me e bo në këtë shtet që nga fillimi i invazionit vitin e kaluar. Por lufta në Ukrainë vazhdon. Shumë teritore dhe popullat e lindjes së Ukrainës është të ballafaqu me invazionin rus, i cili parashikohet nga plot njerëz që kanë biseduar këto që do të zgjas më së paku edhe një vit. Se kur do të shihet fundi kësaj lufte, do të shohim kaq personte prej nesh, vazhdoni me na shumë kallzo.com dhe me na përcjell çdo të premte, shtune e diele në TV Dugagjen, edhe Facebook dhe YouTube të kallzo.com-it. Natën e mirë.